Welcome back. As I say over and over again on Newsmakers, we do not live in a city. We live in a metropolitan area, and the real vitality in that area is at the edges, in the townships. Everywhere along and beyond the Beltway, cornfields and woods are giving way to new residential subdivisions and office parks. That vitality demands planning. Planning for new roads, new sewers, new utilities, and new safety services. Ironically, those demands fall on Ohio's oldest and in many ways its weakest form of government, the township. Those responsible for imposing order on the vast lands controlled by the United States use two dominant systems. In the original eastern states, surveyors used a system called metes and bounds that followed the natural contours of the land. The result shows up in an enhanced satellite photo as an irregular patchwork. With the opening of western Ohio in 1785 and the so-called 7 ranges along the Ohio River, the federal government imposed a new regular survey system. The new building block was the uniform township, running 6 miles along each side. Internally, the township could be broken into predictable square sections, and ultimately down to the proverbial 40 acres. The internal logic of that system guided American expansion, with a few exceptions, all the way to the Pacific. From the air, it appears as an orderly checkerboard of subdivided squares. Ohio, which is one of 22 states that not only uses townships as a basis for dividing land, but for local government, has 1,310 townships. Those are governed by 3 elected trustees. A township clerk is also elected, but has no vote on the issues. In the 1990 census, 4 of Ohio's largest 5 townships were in the greater Cincinnati area. Coleraine and Greene in Hamilton County were 1 and 2. Fairfield in Butler County was 3rd, and Anderson in Hamilton County was 5th. A law passed last summer declared tomorrow as Ohio Township Day. To discuss the status of township government in Ohio, I am joined by 2 guests. Michael Cochran is the Executive Director of the Ohio Township Association, which is headquartered in Columbus. Tom Wollsey is a trustee of Ross Township in Butler County and serves on the Board of Trustees of the Ohio Township Association. Welcome to both of you to Newsmakers. And Tom, thanks for coming down from Columbus. Tom, if you were going to describe for people what exactly a township was responsible for, or generally what a township is responsible for, as a unit of government, how would you describe it?
Well, I think that's a fairly easy answer. One of the things we talk about in township government is that it's responsible for providing basic, fundamental local government services to its constituents, its residents. Those would fall into categories like land use planning, zoning, fire, ambulance, all types of emergency medical services, police services, and of course road services. So the basic things that people look to a local government for help with are the things that Ohio Townships provide.
Now, I want to be clear on this. A township is really an extension of the state government, right? It is this county is an extension of the state government, and the township is an extension of the state government, sort of carrying out the state's program. Is that correct?
Well, no. Not to necessarily disagree with you. Very clearly, the county is.
Okay.
The county is probably best described as an administrative arm of the state government. They administer the land registration system, the criminal justice system, and so on. All of which are the welfare system. All of those are state policies. Townships are a pure form of local government. We don't carry out any state policy the same as cities and villages don't carry out. We make our own policy within limits. Townships are limited. But we act under what authority the state has given us in those areas to act under. But we do not administer state policy anymore than the cities and villages do.
Okay, I stand corrected. And one thing to point out is the township was created in 1785 before either the county or the state government was created. So we'll heck on them. Okay.
Yes. I agree with that.
Tom, you're a township trustee, live in a township, Ross Township in Butler County. What's the best thing as a resident of a township? What's the best thing about township government?
Well, I think township government, by and large, is a little more laid back. When what we call urbanized, you don't have the everyday mix with your local officials. I have phone calls that I have a pothole in front of my house, I have this, I have that, and people feel that since they know me that we will be more apt to take care of their problems. So I think
Is that true?
I think so. I think so. You know, we try to service our people, and I think, you know, the majority of the people trust township government because we are an efficient form of government.
Now, in your township in Ross County, what roads are you responsible? We just went through this snow and ice situation. How many of the roads in your township were you responsible for?
We have 36.7 miles of township road, and the roads that we're responsible for are not state highways and they're not county roads. We have a lot of subdivision streets, and we have a lot of just township roads that were old roads from probably the original roads in through our township. So we maintain the township roads, but we do not maintain state or county roads.
Okay, so those people calling for
Right.
that pothole repair. Now, you know, we're talking about the fact that in a metropolitan area, and this may not be true out in rural Ohio, but in a metropolitan area like Greater Cincinnati, Butler County or Claremont County, Warren County, there's a lot of pressure right now in terms of expansion out there, and that's what I kind of referenced before. Let's talk about some of those issues that, Mike, you were saying that the township's responsible for. What about zoning? How much control do townships really have over the kind of development that's going to take place in their territory?
Well, our townships have the same zoning authority, and we get it from, not to get too technical, but Chapter 519 of the Revised Code, and that authority is the same as any zoning authority. So in terms of strictly zoning, if a township is zoned, if the township has decided to do that, their authority is the same as the city's zoning authority.
So if they assume local zoning, townships don't have to take on zoning, is that correct?
That is correct.
And is...
About half of our townships throughout the state are zoned and half are not.
Okay. Half are zoned in the sense that they control the zoning?
Yes.
Okay. And with this growth, the executive director of the statewide association, do you hear a lot of the trustees who are members of the association talking about the issue of trying to manage that sort of urban, suburban growth?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's clearly our major issue in township government. We're very proud of our large townships, and as you've indicated, several of them are here in the Hamilton and Butler County area. We think, looking at it from a statewide perspective, they do a great job. But they're under enormous pressure in the area of growth. And it's not so much zoning that is the problem, although there is a clear difference. The townships generally are much more restrictive in their density in zoning. They are taking a look at an area, they are trying to follow a plan, and they're much more restrictive, as I said. Whereas the neighboring cities, and this isn't necessarily a knock, I'm not trying to do that, I'm just trying to point out a difference, that they often will grant higher densities. That's often attractive to a developer. If I can put X number of units on a property in the township, but I can put X plus something in the city, then there's pressure. And of course the pressure in many areas of the state, although not always here in Hamilton County, is for water and sewer services. Those two issues are the things that are putting pressure, but it's really the utilities as opposed to the zoning, although zoning is an issue.
Tom, for you in Butler County, I know that traditionally, and not just for your township, but generally, a lot of the services, like safety services, for example, particularly fire, traditionally has been volunteer-based. And in our society today, a lot of volunteer organizations are facing lots of pressures because volunteers aren't there anymore. They're off working two jobs, or husband and wife are both working, or whatever the case may be. Is that something that townships face right now?
It's something that in our township we're facing. You know, it's so tough, as you said, with both parents having to work. And I was a volunteer myself for 23 years. And with the extensive training that they have to go through now, originally most of the townships, at least in Butler County, didn't have their own life squad. They had a fire department, and just a local bunch of people got together, bought a truck, and they tried to service each other, you know. Well, now this thing has progressed, and now there's, I think, just to become an EMT, I'm not up to how many hours it is, but it's just mind-boggling.
Because the state keeps increasing the level of expertise that volunteers have to have. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And the volunteers are, quite frankly, they are professional. They're just unpaid professionals. Mm-hmm. But they have the training the same as the professionals. As a matter of fact, a lot of the volunteers in various townships will go and work for a non-volunteer fire department on a part-time paid basis, which also hurts volunteerism. Because now, we train them and somebody else hires them.
Let me ask another area. One of the times that townships frequently get in the news is when some city wants to annex a piece of a township. Is that controversial for a township association? What are you doing? Are you opposed to annexation in all cases? Do you fight that, or what's the situation?
Well, very clearly, under the idea of growth and how that growth is going to occur, annexation comes into play. Annexation is specifically the issue that is affecting us the most statewide. We do not fight every annexation by any means. What we fight for in the area of annexation and in the area of growth is to be a partner in that. It's our land in the sense that it's within our jurisdiction. It's going to affect our people. Even if it leaves our jurisdiction and joins the neighboring city, whatever goes on that land is going to affect our people. And therefore we should have a seat at the table. We should have a seat in the planning and how that's going to work and all that we've been trying to do at the legislature. And I think this General Assembly we will be successful because there's been a lot of groundwork laid that is to have a fair and open process on the issue of annexation. Okay, we're probably down to about 30 seconds. Tomorrow is Ohio Township Day. What are some of the things that are going to happen around the state? Well, very quickly, there are going to be a lot of township trustees getting into local schools, both the middle and high schools. Going to be some open houses in police facilities, fire facilities, ambulance things, those sorts of things. What about in your township?
Well, in Butler County, we're going to have a Township Day, and the commissioners, I think, are going to do a proclamation, and we're going to have a ceremony tomorrow.
Good. Thank you for being with us. And
thanks for having us.
Township is something that I think we don't pay enough attention to, but an awful lot of people live there, as we said. So good luck on your first Ohio Township Day.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next Sunday when we will talk to the men and women shaping our area for the future. What do you mean? Right. But when you add up all the other things?
You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. 2 weeks ago, Cincinnati Public School Superintendent Stephen Adamowski and School Board President Linwood Battle were guests on Newsmakers. The first question I asked was about the likelihood of a bond issue to fund the proposed $697 million facilities plan would be presented to the voters this year. In the discussion that followed, we talked in very general terms about ways that proposal might be framed. That was on Friday morning. Several hours later, that same day, the school board announced their intention to ask not only for bond money for brick and mortar, but for operating levy, which would account for inflation and equalizing the funding between neighborhood and magnet schools. When all those elements were totaled, it added up to a whopping 17 mills that could cost the owner of a $100,000 house as much as $540 a year. Community reaction was broad and swift and harsh.
People in my church, people in the neighborhood, people in the supermarkets, everywhere I go, they're questioning where has the money gone. But now here they're coming back asking for more money. I think that's where the problem primarily lies in the Cincinnati community.
School officials reacted by backtracking. By last Monday, they insisted a range of 7 options were still available. And by midweek, they were gathering community opinion leaders trying to shore up support. And no matter what else this series of events reveal, it exposed a serious split in the board itself.
I spoke to the county commissioners, and Tom Meyer said, "Are you out of your mind?"
You're going to continue to make those children stay in those kinds of buildings because you're afraid to make the bold step and say, this is what we need.
Did you ever hear the proverb, take one step at a time?
This morning, joined by the leaders of one of the past anti-levy campaigns. Tom Brinkman Jr. is an active member of the Republican Party's Hamilton County Conservative Forum. And the last time Tom was on Newsmakers, he was here in the midst of a struggle to get rid of a petition, challenge a petition about the reform of Cincinnati government. Tom, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Good morning. Thank you.
The school board, the levy proposal. Why did you and others, Chris Finney and other people, why did you react as strongly as you did?
Well, when we first saw their proposal, the initiative of getting 14 to 18 mills was just outrageous. That's one of the largest that's ever been done in the history of the state of Ohio, and it seemed to come out of the blue. Just as you were unprepared when you heard about it, so were we, and I think that kind of focused our opposition to it very quickly, and that was good.
Now, I was very aware, and I'm sure everybody in the community was aware of the facilities plan developing and moving along. Were you prepared for them coming for a bond proposal?
Well, we had been reading what they were going to do with getting rid of the middle schools, basically, having the grades 1 through 8 together, and then the high schools. So we were aware that that was coming down the pike.
And the money to fix up a lot of the old
Sure.
schools.
They were talking in my neighborhood of either closing down Peoples and keeping Hyde Park and consolidating, or closing down Hyde Park and expanding Peoples. So we're aware of that was going on. I think most people in the neighborhoods were.
And if they had come to the voters with a proposal to begin to implement that plan, what would your reaction have been?
Well, we would have taken a good look at it, but I think people see much more activity when you're fixing building facilities. No one wants their kids to go to dilapidated schools, or even other people's children to go to those types of schools. So it would have been viewed more in a more friendly manner.
Now, you have personally,
right?
You have a history of opposing
Right.
tax levies.
I've never voted for a levy in my entire life, and I hope to never do so.
Okay, so on a philosophical level, you're just opposed to tax levies. What are you opposed to? Are you opposed to public schools? Are you opposed to all tax levies?
I do not feel that I have a vote necessarily on all taxes. I don't get to vote on the federal income tax directly and some other taxes that are out there. So what I choose to do is on the taxes that I do have the right to vote on, I vote no. If I had a much more ability to vote on a lot more of them, I would be a little bit different on how I approach them. But right now I just say, enough's enough. They don't give me a chance to vote on some of the other ones, so I choose to vote against the ones that I have a choice on.
Now, realistically, the entity in our society that has to come to the voters most often for tax support are the schools, just because of the way school funding is set up.
That's true.
It won't grow with inflation. It has to be renewed. All of those things that the schools are boxed in, that's just the way it is.
That's true.
So the people that attitude that you're expressing really affects are the school kids. Do you have any qualms of conscience about that?
Well, I keep in mind that there are state-imposed mills that we do not get to vote on. Every state school system in the state gets 19 mills that I didn't have a choice to vote on.
Your representative did.
That's right, and my representative voted on federal income tax too, and I understand that. But they do get some minimums, plus 40% of the state school funding does come from the state. So there are things that they do get regardless of whether I vote for it or not.
Okay, so let's set aside for a moment your personal view, which is sort of just anti-tax.
Right.
Let's take a look at these other pieces of the school board proposal, which besides the bond money for brick and mortar, for the schools and the buildings, there was a proposal there for I forget exactly, 5.7 mils for catch up on inflation. We have not passed a levy since 1995.
Okay.
It's now 4 years later, and in fact, in 1995, they said they'd have to come back in 4 years. I forgot that, unfortunately, but they did say that because of inflation. And in fact, the school funding doesn't grow because of inflation. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with asking the voters for that?
The thing is, they've also lost 8% of their students in the last 5 years. They went in 95, they had 52, almost 53,000 students. They're now down to 48. So they've actually had an increase by keeping the same funds of an 8% increase over those 4 years. So, I mean, they have gotten some growth in money. And, you know, when you look at the numbers, they're spending $8,000 a student. That's more than it costs to go to UC. And that's kind of hard to take.
Well, it's hard to take, but isn't the reality that figured in those funds? And my understanding is your kids, children, have gone to parochial schools.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
That's correct.
Parochial schools do not deal with vocational education. They do not deal with students with disabilities, by and large.
Well, St. Rita's School for the Deaf is an archdiocese school.
Okay, there's a few, but by and large, most of our students who have very significant cost attached to their education end up in the public schools, and then that gets averaged out into that $7,000 to $8,000. And doesn't that have to be taken into account by all of us?
Well, certainly it has to be taken into account, and that's why I think the best way to do it is to look at vouchers or charter schools, something that the Cincinnati Public Schools refuse to do. When you look at what Cleveland's doing, I think they've had some good success initially. They need a little bit longer to do it, but if we could fund the child, which is what Dr. Stephen Adamonsky talks about, he talks about funding the child, let him go to magnet schools or neighborhood schools. Right. And I like that idea, but I say give them a voucher. Don't give them state-imposed or even school board-imposed mandate of where they have to go.
Okay, voucher is one thing, because if you have a voucher, you can opt out of the public school system.
Sure.
But charter schools, and I hear people say, gee, let's get a charter school. Charter schools are still public schools.
That's
it's
correct.
just taking the public funds and letting them follow the child. But they're still public schools, correct?
Well, that's an interesting point. The school board says they're for charter schools, but they want to spin off their own schools to be a charter school. In other areas, people have gone to the school board and said, hey, we want to be a charter school. Give us the funding. Let us run the school. The Edison Project is a good example of that. They came to Cincinnati. They met with the school board. The school board said no.
But the Edison people can then go to Columbus, because the
Sure.
local school board can't stop charter schools. They may not adopt
Right.
them themselves, but they can still get a charter from the state, right?
What I understand is they have to get through the local school board. And what's happening is I think the school boards will pick and choose. In the letters I have is the school board said, Dr. Adamonsky in Delaware chartered schools, but what he did was he spun off schools that were currently school board schools.
And he has said on this show the reason he wants to do that because you can then be more efficient and more creative. That's always been a criticism from people from the outside
Right.
the public school
Right.
system like you, that the schools are inefficient and not creative enough. Right. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, that's a good thing.
Why not work with them?
Well, the problem is one of the evils in all the schools is the teachers union. And the teachers union follows that charter school that comes out of the Cincinnati Public Schools. They're the ones that have seen a pay increase since 1995 from going to the second lowest paid teachers in the county to the second highest paid. They are the highest paid teachers in all the 10 urban school districts in Cincinnati. The school board has taken our money and bought union peace, labor peace, by paying the teachers too much money.
How about the other side of that they're trying to pay for good people to be in those classrooms?
Well, that's the problem. The union hasn't come through with good performance records. There's 59 elementary schools. In the 4th grade proficiency test, 8 schools had not a single child pass it. In the 6th grade proficiency test, 11 schools didn't have a single kid pass the proficiency test. Yet the teachers have seen this tremendous raise in their income. And that's one of the things I think that the school board has gone wrong is joining together with the union and saying we're going to work together. The problem is the teachers haven't upheld their part of the bargain.
We have less than a minute left. one of the things one of your compatriots said, Chris Finney, and I read this in the newspaper, so I didn't hear him say it himself, was he doesn't want to just defeat this proposal, he wants to bury the schools, he wants to embarrass the school board. What good does that do for anybody in the
Well,
community?
you have to read the full quote. He said he wanted to humiliate them into doing the right thing.
And the right thing is?
Charter schools, vouchers.
Charter schools and vouchers, no funding for any of this schools as we know them.
That's correct.
So basically you're into starving out the public schools as we know them.
Just like what we did with the zoo. We said no to their first proposal. They wanted parking garage, exorbitant amount of money. They threatened they were going to get rid of the elephants. When we voted it down, they came back with a much more modest proposal.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much. We'll see what happens on this. Okay. The growth and energy and challenge of planning in this region fall to the townships. Are they up to the task? Stay tuned.